So to me, it's pretty obvious why airing down tires would actually give you more suspension travel, but to you, it might not be totally obvious. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna drive up on this dock, hopefully almost get a tire off the ground, and we're gonna air down the tire, and I'm gonna show you that it actually does give you more suspension travel. All right, that took a lot longer than I thought. I had to go way further up this than I thought I would have needed to, but I guess she's got a little bit more travel than I thought she does. Take you down here. I'm going to show you this tire right here is completely off the ground, so you can slide that all the way under here. It's probably only got, you know, half an inch, 13 mil, something like that. So the next thing we're going to do is go air this tire down right here, and to show you that there's actually more suspension travel from airing your tires down, that one over there should come into contact with the ground. This is how I like to air my tires down. So I got these special valve stem caps, and they actually have a Schrader valve removal tool built right into them. So you essentially just invert the cap, and then the entire takes a while on thread, fine threads of course. So that's my normal trail pressure. We'll see if that tire is touching the ground now. So we got the folder of truth here. There's the same plant, so you know I didn't move the truck, and it is actually contacting the ground now. Again, all I changed was the tire pressure on that one tire. We'd actually get even more suspension travel if we aired down this tire over here, because it's in contact with the ground. Before we get off that, I think you got to agree, even if you're a Jeep guy, that looks pretty freaking cool. Before we completely get off this obstacle here, I did want to show you this as well, because it's another point I'm going to make. You can see here how the tire will actually conform to an obstacle. So as it's kind of grabbing around this obstacle, that will help to pull you up over an obstacle. If your tire is fully inflated, it won't be able to conform as well around that obstacle. So this right here is also the companion video to why you should air down your tires. This truck has a super cool 4-tire air system that also connects to airbags. And the really nice thing about it too is the airbag, or the air compressor and the airbags actually, which are controlled from right here. And then I can also read the pressure of the tires from inside the cab. And again, that connects to all 4 tires. It's super cool. If you like the ideal of airing down off-road, make sure and check that video out too. All right, so I'm going to use these 2 flat pieces of metal, and I'm going to run them up underneath the tire here. And what we're essentially doing with this is seeing how big or how wide that contact patch is. And now we'll slide these guys forward because I don't want them getting trapped underneath the tire. We'll check this pressure here. So the tire is sitting at, my normal street pressure is 57.5 PSI. And now what we're going to do is pull air out of this tire and see how much this footprint grows by. Okay, so I've got this tire where I want. It's at 25 PSI. And now I'm gonna reinstall the Schrader valve here so it'll hold its pressure. And then we've got 2 more straight edges here. We're gonna stick them under the tire and see how much this footprint is actually grown by. All right, so this is a very rigid sidewall on this tire. It's an E-rated tire, but you can see this little gap here. That's essentially all the additional contact that it has with the road. And to be honest, I usually go down a little further with this. I usually do about 20 to 15 PSI. So we get an even bigger footprint with that.
So essentially that bigger contact patch just means your vehicle is contacting more ground, and consequently it's not going to sink as far into any given terrain that you're driving over. Essentially it just means your vehicle is going to float over whatever you're driving a little bit easier. This is particularly important when you're doing sand driving.
Another thing airing down your tires can do for you is actually making your vehicle less likely to get a puncture in one of the tires. And the reason for that is, as you can see here, this is not a particularly pointy rock, but if it were a particularly pointy rock, it's pretty much supporting that tire on one point because there's so much pressure in here, the tire can't conform and wrap around this rock. Now, if you air down, which I'll show you now, so with the tire aired down, you can see it is contacting a lot more of this rock. So the pressure at any given point at the interface between the tire and the rock is less, and therefore you are less likely to get a puncture in the side of your tire when you're aired down. So underneath the truck here, this tire is at 35 psi and this tire is at 13.5 psi. I want to show you one of the sort of cons to airing down your tires. So you actually get less ground clearance when you air down your tires. If we go and measure them in the exact same spot, which is going to be right beside the spring hanger here, this one is 14.5, 14 3/4, we'll call that. And this side is 14. So we lost, what, 1/2 inch to 3/4 of an inch? So that's like around 13 mil. Now, that's not something that's like super important for me, at least, because I have sort of large tires. If you have more stock size tires, you might want to not air down as far so you don't lose as much of that ground clearance. Obviously, as you saw, there's a big pressure deficit left to right, but it was a small change in ground clearance. However, the trade-off is you get all that flotation and additional traction and all of the other benefits we talked about in this video. So there are a few more cons to airing down your tires. Hopefully this doesn't talk you out of airing down, because it's totally worth it. But I do need to talk about these. So probably one of the biggest failures you can get from your tire is by pinching your tire between the rim and an obstacle. So say there's a tree rut that we're trying to climb over, the tire deforms around it, of course, that is a pro, but if it's aired down too far, the tree rut, for example, will come up and it'll pinch the tire between the rim and the tree. That can lead to like a weak spot in the sidewall, and it can lead to a blowout. The way to get around that is just don't air down so far. Another issue that you can have is heating of the sidewall. So you can see this part of the sidewall straight, and this part of the sidewall, we are super aired down, by the way. This is at 5 psi. This part of the sidewall is very, very curved. Hopefully that's appearing on camera. But essentially, as it goes from straight to that very, very curved shape, you can get a lot of heat built up in the sidewall, and eventually you get the tire to fail. I've been off-roading for many, many years, eight years, something like that, and I have never had a sidewall failure from airing down the tires. Again, we never go down this far. Another thing that can happen is if you go on the road where your tires are down this much, and like say somebody pulls out in front of you or something and you need to swerve, if you can imagine the rim turning and then the tire essentially has very, very slow, sluggish response. So you can see the truck just from me shaking it. Anyways, you get very, very slow steering response if your tires air down too far. Again, the way to get around that is just air up your tires before you go on road. So if you look at this little diagram here, this is a cross section of a tire and a rim. So this center section would be a rim, and then these two parts right here would be a tire. And as you can see from this, like these blue arrows are pressure essentially forcing out against the sidewall of the tire. And this is what keeps what's called a bead, or what keeps the tire seated against the rim. And this could be an issue if you air down too far. You can actually, it becomes more likely to debead the tire off of the rim. Essentially what can happen is if there's enough side load exerted on the tire, it'll force the tire off of the rim, and then all of the air escapes, so you have no force keeping it on keeping the tire on the rim, and then it just kind of falls off essentially. I've driven pretty fast off-road and had some huge cornering loads, which would be a side force like this, pushing on the tire, and I've actually never debeaded a tire off of the rim. So as long as you don't go down too far, debeading a tire off of the rim is not an issue. So this is one of the biggest things I want to show when it comes to airing down your tires. So if I go right here and push down on the rear bumper of this truck, this tire is aired down, and hopefully you can see there's quite a lot of compliance to the sidewall of that tire because it's aired down. And then if we come over to this side, this tire is at full pressure. And if I go put even more weight on it than I was putting on the other side with both hands, pretty much all of the movement is happening in this suspension. This, in my opinion, is one of the biggest benefits to airing down your tires. With this at high pressures, there's essentially no give in the sidewall of this guy. Consequently, there's pretty much everything transmitted to the truck or the occupants in the truck. So the biggest one is probably when the tire's bouncing up and down off-road, it's going to put a lot of heat into your shock absorbers, and that prematurely wears them out. Also, you're transmitting a lot of other vibrations into the chassis, and that can loosen bolts and stuff like that. Obviously, that is not a good thing. In my opinion, the biggest benefit to airing down is that the sidewall of the tire is actually absorbing all of those road imperfections, and they do not get transmitted into the interior of the truck, making for a much smoother ride. That is hands down my favorite reason to air down.
And the last one I wanted to note is with you airing down, you're just doing less damage to the trail. All the additional flotation and all the additional traction that you get means you're just not going to wear the trail out as much, you know? It may not be a big deal to be spinning tires and whatnot at your local off-road spot, but when you're out in like a national forest or a national park somewhere and you're off-roading there, or you're climbing a mountain pass in Colorado, those trails and those off-road spots get closed when they get torn up. So airing down helps to keep those things open. This video has been a part of a 3-part series on airing up and airing down your tires. You've already seen my 4-tire air system, and I'm pretty sure you've already seen how I deflate tires by pulling the valve core. The big thing if you decide to air down your tires is just making the air up and down process quick and easy and painless, because if it's quick, easy, and painless, you're going to be more likely to do it.